Hello friends, and welcome to this presentation on the intervention of continuous process improvement. A couple things before we begin. I found the button to turn off the video camera so you guys won't have to stare at the front of my head this time. And I really tried to keep your formatting concerns in mind, and I did what I could to shrink the fonts and make the slides a little more readable for y'all. So with that in mind, let's get started. First, the overview. Continuous process improvement, or CPI, is exactly how it sounds. The purpose is to improve services, products, or internal processes incrementally over time. So this essentially means that instead of doing one large change, as we've read about in some of our textbook readings, when a consultant comes in and you have to make a gigantic change in the way something is run, people tend to push back against it. Well, if you can do a change in which the change itself is done in incremental stages, you can have less of a problem implementing the change, and also you can have more employees participating in the change process. There will be more on that later, and in fact, I think I'm getting ahead of myself. So, CPI is synonymous with product life cycles, management philosophies, and the overall improvement or evolution of an organization. So, it's something that happens naturally as an organization changes and evolves. The way you do things and your processes for doing things change. And as long as you're evolving and growing as an organization, it's kind of difficult not to change and not to evolve and change your processes. However, in the example section, we will see one example of an organization that really, in my opinion at least, hasn't changed much over time. And as I've said already, CPI is usually carried out using small increments. Everyone can participate in the change process. It is rare to use CPI to implement a change rapidly. So as we already stated, it's incremental is the whole idea. And the changes happen as you evolve. We already went through this. CPI, again, happens naturally. As long as an organization continues to improve in any aspect, CPI is present. And even though this process happens, as long as an organization is evolving, it doesn't happen if the organization remains stagnant. I'm sorry if I'm not reading these slides exactly. I'm just trying not to cover where I got ahead of myself. Okay, now we talk about the strengths and weaknesses of this particular concept. Strengths are it occurs alongside other organizational processes. So, for example, if you're doing strategic management, chances are you're looking for ways to capitalize on opportunities and change the way the organization is run, how it handles its stakeholders, where it can break into the market, etc. By doing this, inevitably, or most likely at least, you're going to change some internal processes within your organization. And I forgot to say also that because of that, because it's so ingrained into other parts of the organization itself, CPI usually doesn't have to be singled out into its own topic. It's integrated into everything so well that something like this presentation normally doesn't happen. This presentation is just to familiarize yourself with the concept. The weaknesses are there are no clearly defined process for every organization. So if you remember in the last presentation I did, I gave you the 6 steps for facilitation. When researching this particular intervention, I couldn't really find any outlineable formula for this particular concept. And I think that's because all organizations' missions and visions are different. So it's impossible to put CPI into a set of static steps because every organization will have different ways to improve their processes, products, services, etc., depending on what market they're in and what they're trying to provide and achieve. And then the second weakness is does not happen in certain organizations. This will make more sense when the examples come. Okay, so here are the examples, and instead of writing them all the way out because I thought it would take too much room on the slide like last time, I'm just going to explain what I wrote here. So Microsoft and Apple, CPI is active. What I mean by that is they are always changing and improving what they sell and their process for creating things because they're a tech company. Tech companies thrive off change and innovation. So for example, when Apple released the 2E, we had very little in the way of screen resolution. And the way we manufactured monitors inhibited how much resolution we could put on a screen. Now, Apple has some of the most vibrant displays ever conceived for computers because they have new technology, they've changed their process, and they've adapted that into their products. Same thing with Microsoft and their products as well. They've become much more user-oriented. It's almost as if you don't even know how to work a computer anymore. You do to some extent, but the process has been very much streamlined and very much dumbed down. That is a perfect example of continuous process improvement because it cascades through everything these two companies do. Now let's talk about a company that doesn't really change over time and is stagnant. Yellow Cab. CPI is not very active, and this second one is just an example I thought of in my own experience. I don't drive, so I've used Yellow Cab for a long time until the advent of services like Uber, Lyft, things of that nature, which blew the Yellow Cab business model out of the water. For example, if I call a Yellow Cab where I am right now, it will take 45 to 60 minutes to get here. And that's because you still have to call the operator, give them the address. In some cases, I've had to give them a card number. They have to verify that they can send a car out, then they do it, and then the car's on its way, and you get the idea. It's mired in old processes. With Uber and Lyft, for example, you just have an app and you hit a button and usually the car's there within 10 minutes. No cash exchanges hands. It's most likely a much nicer car than you would get with a Yellow Cab. And you're basically in and out very quickly. And because Uber and Lyft and companies like it are changing the transportation game, Yellow Cab fights against it because it doesn't really want to change or evolve. And it uses its political connections to try and remain relevant, even though it has become stagnant in the way of process improvement. So here are the references. Like last time, I'm not going to read them all, but as you can see, this is a very interesting topic. The concept is